All right, let's jump right into this incredibly fascinating and honestly slightly unsettling mystery of the human mind. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we get to play the detective of our very own subconscious. Have you ever wondered why certain dreams just stick with you for days, weeks, or even years? Well, our source material today takes us on a deep dive into a profoundly complex dream, literally a 20-year psychological chase, to unpack exactly what our minds are trying to tell us when we're asleep.
You know, that exact moment, right? You jolt awake in the dead of night, your eyes darting around a dark room, and you are completely, totally unable to move. You're just trapped by that lingering, heavy anxiety of a nightmare that absolutely refuses to let go of your waking mind. Our source material for this explainer totally nails this visceral feeling. The author describes a dream so intense that upon waking, their chest was just fluttering. It felt entirely like reality, leaving them breathless and physically shaken. It's that haunting sensation where, even though your logical brain knows it was just a dream, your emotional brain is still loudly ringing the alarm bells. Section 1. Nightmare's Identity, Unmasking the Dream. Let's open our psychological case file and examine the actual incident that kicked off this deeply distressing nightmare.
So, here is the core event of the dream. A friend accidentally drops the dreamer's beloved dog, and tragically, the dog's life is taken away. In a flash of pure blind rage and just overwhelming grief, the dreamer retaliates against the friend before frantically fleeing the chaotic scene. It's an incredibly heavy, dramatic sequence, but in dream analysis, you have to remember that these intense events are almost never literal. They're highly symbolic.
Now, when we actually decode these dark symbols, it's super fascinating. The beloved dog doesn't just represent a pet. According to the source, a dog often symbolizes someone or something that offers you unconditional acceptance. So the threat to the dog is really a reflection of your waking anxiety that this unconditional love or security is somehow being threatened. And that horrible feeling of being unable to save the dog, that points directly to a massive capacity for empathy. The guilt you're feeling in the dream is actually masking your profound desire to protect the things you care about. It shows you're not a cold person, you're someone who feels the weight of responsibility super deeply.
Section 2. Decoding the Escape. Running from actions. Let's move into the next phase of the dream and see how this builds into a desperate attempt to outrun our very own decisions.
Because the dream doesn't just end after the escape. The dreamer actually spends an excruciating 2 decades on the run within the narrative. Year 1 is just pure panic. By year 10, the specific memories start to fade, but that underlying knot of anxiety, it stays right there. And finally, by year 20, the guilt catches up. This brilliantly illustrates that simply letting time pass does absolutely nothing to heal unaddressed emotional pain. Time might blur the details, sure, but the emotional debt remains exactly the same. And for those entire 2 decades, the dreamer is being hunted by the police. But who are these police, really? Well, here's the kicker. The authorities chasing you aren't real external forces. They're projections of your own strict self-punishment. The source points out that people who have a habit of judging themselves harshly will constantly create these endless pursuit narratives in their dreams. You are literally the one refusing to let yourself off the hook. Section 3. Hidden Righteousness, Anger and Justice. Let's dig a little deeper into the motive and uncover the complex web of conflicting emotions fighting for dominance in the dreamer's mind. We've got a total psychological tug-of-war going on here. On one hand, there's righteousness, that internal voice insisting the retaliation was totally justified because something precious was lost. But on the other hand, there's crushing guilt and deep regret for causing harm. Our source emphasizes that feeling justified and guilty at the exact same time isn't some weird contradiction or flaw. Actually, it's proof that you are analyzing your actions from multiple emotional angles. It is completely natural for humans to protect their ego with righteousness, while their conscience feels the heavy weight of guilt. And this totally flips how we usually view the rage felt in the dream. We usually think of anger as this shameful loss of control, right? But actually, scratch that. It's more like a natural protective plea for help when something precious is threatened. It brilliantly illustrates that if you suppress your waking life frustrations and just pretend everything is fine, those feelings are going to violently explode in your dreams. It's your subconscious desperately waving a red flag, signaling that your boundaries are being crossed and need protecting. Section 4. The Cost of Running. Day-to-day toll. So what actually happens in our waking life when we avoid taking responsibility and keep all these intense feelings bottled up?
There's this incredibly poignant scene later in the dream set in an airport.
The dreamer finds himself tumbling away from the normal designated path, just utterly unable to walk alongside the rest of the crowd. This creates a feeling of extreme, agonizing isolation. It's such a perfect visual representation of the heavy burden of carrying a secret guilt. When you hide a core part of yourself, you inevitably feel totally out of step with the rest of the world.
Which leads us to a massive takeaway. Escaping might protect you temporarily from immediate consequences or an awkward confrontation, but it ultimately destroys your connection to others. By constantly running from our perceived mistakes and hiding our true feelings, we might feel a fleeting sense of safety, but the tragic irony is that we end up locking ourselves out of the communities, the relationships, and the deep connections that we actually crave.
Section 5. Forgiving your past self. Stopping the run. So, how do we finally stop running? Let's look at the source material's guidance on how to close this psychological case and end the cycle for good.
In the final, frankly terrifying scene of the dream, the dreamer is completely cornered. They are surrounded by a massive crowd, all shining smartphone lights right at them as they're taken away. It's a very modern nightmare image, perfectly capturing that overwhelming fear of public exposure and judgment. But remember what we learned earlier about the police? This crowd isn't the rest of the world. It is the dreamer's own mind putting them on trial.
To break this brutal cycle of nightmares and self-punishment, the source lays out 3 really practical steps. Step 1. Stop labeling your emotions as good or bad. Anger and guilt are just signals. They aren't character flaws. Step 2. Calmly observe your feelings without letting them take the wheel. Just notice them, kind of like clouds passing in the sky. And step 3, which is probably the most actionable tool, write down your anxiety. Journaling helps process all those suppressed emotions. And crucially, write an apology or a note of understanding to your past self, really acknowledging that you were just trying to protect yourself. So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. Who is really judging you? Is it the world, or is it yourself? The source makes it beautifully clear. If we can just learn to embrace our past mistakes not as horrific crimes, but as misguided acts of protection, we can finally turn off those harsh smartphone lights in our minds. We can stop running, put the past to rest, and actually find true peace in our waking lives. Thanks so much for exploring the mysteries of the human mind with me today, and I'll see you in the next explainer.